The harvest moon hung low over the small village of Tan Lok, painting the rice field silver. Man was 13 the first time he felt death's presence in his home. Living in a simple wooden house with bamboo walls and a thatched roof, he shared the space with his father Chow, his mother Lin, and his 2 younger sisters, Tu and Na. Though poor, they were content, until the night grandfather died. Grandfather Din had been bedbound for months, an undiagnosed fever slowly burning him away. Late one humid evening, Man heard frantic shouting from the adjoining room. Rushing in, he found his grandfather's chest rising and falling in labored gasps. Grandfather's eyes rolled back, lips trembling as if seeing something beyond mortal sight. Then, an unearthly silence as the old man gave one final exhale. The family grieved, but there was no time for prolonged mourning. An elaborate funeral had to be arranged quickly, as tradition demanded. Villagers came to pay respects, offering incense and small donations. Overnight vigils were held, prayers chanted to guide grandfather's spirit to the ancestors. Yet on the night before the burial, Man stepped outside for air and felt a strange pull toward the bamboo grove behind the house. Cicadas droned, thick in the humid air. He glimpsed movement, shadowy shapes dancing among the swaying stalks. For a moment, he saw something tall, impossibly thin, head lolling at an odd angle. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. He returned to the funeral hall, unnerved. Family members were dozing in corners or whispering in hushed tones. The coffin, draped in white cloth, stood at the center. Incense smoke curled overhead. Man couldn't dispel the sensation of being watched from every window, every shadowed corner. The burial proceeded the next morning. The body was laid to rest in the ancestral plot. The men of the family shoveled earth until the coffin disappeared beneath the mound. Mana's father Chow offered final words, voice tight with sorrow. Everyone believed that would bring peace to grandfather's soul. But within a fortnight, tragedy revisited. Man awoke to screaming, his mother Lin's voice. Rushing to the main room, he saw his mother holding Hone, a distant cousin who had been helping around the house since grandfather's passing. Hone's face was ashen. She convulsed violently, eyes bulging. In a matter of hours, she too died, never regaining consciousness. No one could explain how a healthy young woman collapsed so suddenly. Fear seeped through the household, a suffocating dread. At night, Man heard soft scratching from the roof. Tu and Na complained that they felt cold fingers brushing their blankets. Father Chow dismissed it as village superstitions. But Man began to suspect a dark force latched onto his family, some malignant presence awakened by grandfather's death. Unbeknownst to them all, the nights of terror had only begun. After cousin Hone's abrupt passing, the villagers whispered of Trung Tang, the dreaded phenomenon of consecutive deaths that befell certain families, rumored to be caused by vengeful spirits or cursed ancestors. People tried to keep a distance from Mana's household. Even close friends hesitated to visit, as though the home was contaminated by an unseen plague. Mana's parents grew quieter, stressed by daily farm work and mounting funeral costs. They did not speak openly of curses, but muttered uneasy prayers at the ancestral altar each evening. Father Chow burned extra joss paper, leaving fruit offerings for grandfather's spirit. If anything, it seemed to make the air heavier. Within a month, tragedy struck again. This time, it was Mana's aunt, Twen, who came to deliver fresh vegetables. She complained of a headache, lay down for a rest, and never rose. By nightfall, she was gone. No fever, no visible wound, just a shockingly rapid departure from life. 3 deaths in quick succession. The family had lost all sense of normalcy. People in Tan Lok said the household was cursed. They're marked by the black spirits, an old woman muttered. Something foul from the other side has claimed them. At Aunt Twen's funeral, no one lingered. In the pale morning light, only immediate relatives remained to fill the grave. The atmosphere was oppressive, as if the sky itself pressed down on them. Father Chow, who once had a commanding presence, moved like a beaten man. By now, Mana's younger sisters were terrified, refusing to sleep alone. The nights were filled with their whimpers, and Man would join them, huddled under a single mosquito net. He too was gripped by nightmares, visions of the same tall, lanky shadow from the bamboo grove standing at the foot of his bed, reaching out with spindly fingers. Sometimes he saw flickers of movement near the ancestral altar, candles dimming unaccountably, the bowls of fruit rotting faster than they should. He told Father Chow, but Chow simply pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed, "We can't give in to fear. The moment we do, it wins." Still, none of them could deny the pattern of death weaving around their family. The elders recalled that Trung Tang Lin Tong meant the entire household was at risk if no intervention occurred. With 2 funerals so close, the dread was that more caskets would be needed soon. Late one night, Man stirred from a dreamless doze to see his father slipping out of the house, hoe slung over his shoulder. Man followed at a distance, heart pounding. Moonlight revealed Chow trudging toward the bamboo grove. Near the largest clump of bamboo, Chow began digging frantically. Man crept closer, stepping carefully to avoid rustling leaves. His father was muttering, "Let me find you, damn it. I know you're here." He stabbed the ground, cursing in strangled whispers. Suddenly, the hoe struck something with a resonant thud. Chow dragged up a box about the size of a small chest, encrusted in dirt. He pried it open, revealing sinister objects. Black talismans covered in unfamiliar script, a dried blackened foot of some animal, and a coil of twisted brittle rope. Before Man could utter a word, he felt a cold presence swirl around them. A guttural hiss carried on the night breeze. The tall shape from his nightmares flickered in the periphery of his vision. Father Chow snapped the box shut, panting. "I suspected the old man left something behind," he said, voice trembling. "Your grandfather. He meddled with dark things in his youth. And now it's come for us." They heard a rustle among the bamboo. Man shone his lantern, but only the reflection of the moonlit stems stared back, mocking their fear. Father Chow destroyed the box's contents by torching them in the backyard pit. Sparks flew under the moonlit sky. The heat made Mana's eyes sting. "This should end it," Chow said, lips pressed tight. "I pray we've freed ourselves from that legacy." But the next evening, Uncle Duong visited with a cough that worsened into body-racking convulsions by midnight. He died on a straw mat, choking on his own saliva. A stunned hush enveloped the house. Another casket. Another funeral. 4 deaths, all in under 2 months. Now the rumor of Trung Tang spread to distant villages, and nobody dared set foot in Tan Lok unless necessary. Even distant relatives refused to attend Duong's funeral. A handful of old men from the hamlet, pitying Chow, helped bury Duong before daybreak. Then they hurried back to their own homes. Man found himself in a perpetual state of anxiety, jumping at every noise. The family finances were dire, for funerals drained them of meager savings. Fear gnawed at the survivors: Father Chow, Mother Lin, Man, and the 2 little girls. Not long after Duong's burial, Chow decided to send the girls away to a relative in the next province, hoping to protect them. Man was to stay behind and help Chow tend the fields. But the real reason was more chilling. "They're safer away from this house," Chow whispered to Man. "I can't let them be next." That same night, as Man dozed in his corner of the main room, he startled awake to hear Mother Lin screaming from the sleeping area. He dashed in. A horrifying sight met his eyes. A towering silhouette crouched on Lin's bed, bony hands wrapped around her neck. Lin's eyes bulged, face turning purple. She clawed at the air, unable to scream further. Man lunged at the shape, but his arms passed through nothing. It felt ice cold, stinging his skin. Lin collapsed, unconscious. Father Chow, awakened by the noise, ran in with a lit oil lamp. The lamp's glow revealed only Lin, limp and gasping for breath. The shadow had vanished. They nursed Lin back to consciousness, tears streaming as she coughed painfully. "Something was strangling me," she rasped. Bruises formed in the shape of handprints on her throat, though no living hand had touched her. Mana's entire body trembled. The demon had shown itself in full. This wasn't a slow, mysterious illness like the earlier deaths. It was a direct attack. And it was only growing bolder. At dawn, Lin could barely speak. Man and Chow watched over her anxiously. "We need someone who knows how to fight these devils," Chow admitted, brow furrowed. "I heard rumors of a traveling shaman who roams these parts. If we don't act soon, we'll lose your mother, or each other." Man nodded, heart pounding with both terror and resolve. He would not stand by while his family was picked off one by one. Later that week, while Man was feeding the chickens in the yard, a stranger arrived at the gate. He was a wiry man in his 50s named Mr. Tan, wearing worn clothes and carrying a cloth satchel. His eyes were unusually bright and intense. He introduced himself: "I'm passing through from Nam Dinh. I heard a rumor this house has known multiple deaths in recent weeks." He gave Man a penetrating look. "Sometimes we blame fate, but there can be darker forces." Father Chow joined them in the yard. "Are you a traveling merchant?" he asked, weary suspicion in his voice. Mr. Tan shook his head. "I've been called many things, a medium, an exorcist, a fraud. Regardless, I sense malevolence here. If you let me help, I will. If not, I'll leave at once." Chow hesitated only a moment. In desperation, he invited Tan inside. They offered him water and told him of the multiple deaths, the terrifying attacks, the possibility of an ancestral curse. At the mention of the demon man had seen strangling Lin, Tan nodded gravely. "Such a spirit is no mere ghost. It's a Kui, born from deep hatred or a twisted pact." Mother Lin, still weak, rested on a mat. Tan approached her, holding a small brass mirror. He murmured an incantation, focusing on Lin's bruised neck. Then he fell silent, lips tightening. "Yes. The demon has marked her. It hunts your bloodline." Man shuddered, recalling the items in the box they had burned. "Is it because of my grandfather's dealings with black magic?" Tan's eyes flickered with sympathy. "Likely so. Dark bargains often demand payment. The spirits might be collecting that debt from each family member." "Can we stop it?" Chow asked, voice raw. Tan folded his arms. "We must try. First, I need to see the rooftop, then the altar room. I suspect I'll find signs of the demon's presence." Chow led him through the house. In the dim hallway, the walls seemed to breathe. A constant hush, as though the entire structure braced for another tragedy. When they reached the ancestor altar, Tan stilled. The incense urn had cracked down the middle, ash spilling onto the wooden table. The fruit offerings were rotted, swarming with flies though they had been fresh hours earlier. "Your demon is close," Tan muttered. "We must lure it out, or it will keep picking you off." That night, Tan insisted the family stay together in the main room. He spread protective talismans at each corner, sprinkled salt along thresholds, and lit thick candles of black wax. The plan was to confront the demon, forcing it to reveal itself fully. Meanwhile, Mana's pulse pounded as if every breath of wind might carry the monster's presence. Around midnight, a foul stench permeated the air, and a guttural growl echoed from the rafters. Tan gestured for silence. Man caught a glimpse of something lurking near the ceiling, two white eyes glinting in the candlelight, then a stretching grin that vanished. The boards creaked overhead. The family huddled near Tan, who began chanting a low, rhythmic invocation. A wave of cold air blasted through. The candles flickered, their flames guttering but not extinguishing. Then from the shadows, an elongated limb darted out, slashing at Father Chow. Tan shoved Chow aside, raising a dagger etched with symbols. The demon hissed, retreating into darkness, leaving behind an echo of hideous laughter. "Tomorrow," Tan said, voice grim, "we strengthen these wards. This creature won't surrender easily." That laughter lingered in Mana's mind, a promise that the night's assault was only a test. A more vicious onslaught awaited them all. The next morning, Tan demanded access to the roof. "I suspect it's nesting there," he said, face set in determination. He climbed a ladder, with Man following reluctantly. The rooftop was thatched, worn from age and weather. As they moved aside some patches, they discovered a horrifying sight. Clumps of black fur and dried bones from small animals scattered in a shallow indentation. It looked like a makeshift nest. The stench was overwhelming, an acrid, rotting odor. Tan crouched, pressing his palm lightly on the thatch. Closing his eyes, he seemed to commune with some hidden current of energy. This is where it draws power. It has claimed your rooftop as its domain. Each time someone dies, it grows stronger. He pulled from his satchel a vial of pungent liquid and poured it over the nest. It bubbled, releasing a smoky reek. Next, he hammered small iron nails in a circle around the spot, chanting under his breath. "Iron and blessed oil. It should disrupt its hold," he explained, wiping sweat from his brow. Man shuddered. "But if it's stuck here, won't it just attack more violently?" Tan regarded him with weary sympathy. "Yes. It will rage. But that's exactly how we can force it into a final confrontation. Otherwise, you'll bleed victims one by one. We need to finish this." They climbed down, telling Father Chow what they had found. Chow's face darkened, shoulders sagging under the weight of so many horrors. "Whatever must be done," he said hoarsely. "I can't lose my wife or my son." All day, Tan prepared for a midnight ritual, scrawling arcane symbols on slips of red paper. He taught Man how to hold a ghost-busting branch of thorny bush. Though Man felt fear twisting inside him, he resolved to stand by Tan and Chow. Mother Lin, trembling from her strangulation ordeal, busied herself with what chores she could. Her eyes held a distant terror. As dusk fell, thunder rumbled on the horizon. A storm threatened. Man stood outside, scanning the bruised sky. He wondered if the demon had summoned it, or if it was simply nature's cruelty. Either way, the storm would soon batter their fragile defenses. Inside, Tan laid out a line of black dog fur across thresholds, a trick he insisted would repel certain evil spirits. He also hung large bells at the corners of the main room, explaining that the demon's presence might make them ring. The entire house was transformed into a defensive fortress of talismans, salt, iron, and odd relics. But Man noticed something odd about Father Chow. As Tan gave instructions, Chow appeared distant, sweat beading on his brow. Sometimes he massaged his neck as though it hurt. When Man asked, Chow simply muttered, "I'm fine. Just exhausted." An uneasy intuition coiled in Mana's gut. Was the demon already influencing Chow? Darkness settled. Rain pattered on the thatch. The family and Tan gathered in the main room again. The storm outside escalated, wind shrieking around the eaves. Each flash of lightning cast looming shapes on the walls. The stage was set for the demon's next move. Close to midnight, thunder boomed, rattling the timbers of the house. The lamps danced, shadows flickering grotesquely. Tan stood in the center of the room, reciting prayers. Father Chow, Man, and Lin formed a circle with him. The bells at the room's corners hung silent for now. Lightning illuminated the windows. The wind howled. Suddenly, the bells jangled with violent force, as if plucked by invisible hands. All four turned to see them swaying frantically, though no breeze stirred inside. A deep moan reverberated from above. The thatched roof sagged as if something massive landed on it. The stench from earlier poured in, making them gag. A moment later, the thatch near the center tore open, showering debris onto the floor. Two skeletal hands, elongated and claw-tipped, penetrated the opening. Tan brandished his dagger. Man held his breath, heart hammering. Father Chow clutched a mulberry switch, the knuckles of his hand white with tension. Lin cried out, but Tan roared over the cacophony, chanting an incantation that caused the demon to recoil temporarily. The demon's face emerged, a contorted visage lacking normal human features. Just hollow eye sockets and a lipless mouth stretched in a grin. It hissed, drool or black tar dripping from the maw. Thunder crashed again. Tan hurled a handful of black dog fur soaked in holy water. The demon screeched, momentarily retreating through the hole in the roof. Sheets of rain blew in. The lamp flames guttered, threatening to plunge them into darkness. Suddenly, Father Chow stiffened. A gurgling came from his throat. He dropped his switch, hands clawing at an invisible chokehold. Man cried, "Father!" and lunged to help, but Chow staggered away, eyes rolling back. Lin sobbed, pulling at Chow's arms, trying to free him. The demon's voice rasped from overhead, a guttural laughter merging with Chow's choking. Tan dashed forward, pressing a talisman to Chow's chest. A shriek tore from Chow's lips, yet it sounded like two voices layered together, one belonging to Chow, the other belonging to that demonic presence. The father collapsed to his knees, trembling uncontrollably. Man risked a glance upward. The demon glared down from the roof's gash, drooling black fluid that hissed on contact with the salted floor. "He's possessed." Tan shouted, eyes wide. "It's trying to take him fully. We must break its hold." Lightning flashed, revealing the nest on the rooftop, now consumed by swirling shadows. Man realized that blocking the nest with iron nails had forced the demon to seek a living host within the family. Chow, though spiritually strong, was battered by grief, a ripe target. Tan flung more dog fur and recited a fierce chant. The demon reeled, but Chow, mouth hanging open, lunged at Tan, nearly knocking him over. "Stop, father!" Man screamed, tears mixing with sweat. Lin crumpled to the floor, overcome by horror. Tan struggled, pinned beneath Chow's unnatural strength. "Hold him!" Tan yelled. Man wrestled with Chow, tears streaming, while Tan pressed a second talisman to Chow's brow. A shrill, inhuman wail shook the rafters. Chow convulsed, the demon's influence seemingly loosening its grip. In a final desperate move, Tan cut his own palm with the dagger, letting blood drip onto Chow's chest. "Spirit of evil, be severed from this living vessel," Tan roared. "In the name of all that is sacred, depart." Chow screamed, thrashing, then collapsed in a heap. The demon's face above let out a roar, furious that its possession was broken. The entire house shook as if battered by gale force winds. The lamps flickered out. In the darkness, man heard Tan's voice. "It's wounded, but not destroyed. Brace yourselves for the last attack." Lightning revealed the demon slithering down through the torn roof. It drooped like a grotesque marionette, limbs cracking at wrong angles. Claws scraped the wooden beams. Rainwater cascaded in, forming puddles that reflected the demon's twisted shape. Tan quickly lit a resin torch, its fierce flame pushing back the shadows. Father Chow coughed, regaining consciousness. Lin crawled to him, sobbing with relief. Man stood between them and the demon, fear surging in every fiber of his body. The demon hissed in a voice that echoed many voices at once: grandfather's, Aunt Twen's, even Cousin Hone's final death rattle. "How dare you break the bargain?" Tan began a new chant, stepping closer, brandishing the dagger and torch. The demon jerked, as if hammered by unseen blows. But in a sudden movement, it lunged forward, swiping a claw at Tan's chest. Tan stumbled, the dagger clattering to the floor. Man couldn't stand idle. He snatched a lit candle and dashed forward, pressing it to the demon's bony arm. The creature shrieked, rearing back. Even as terror threatened to freeze him, man felt a surge of adrenaline. He remembered all the loved ones taken, all the funerals overshadowed by gloom. He would fight. In its fury, the demon's mouth opened wide, spewing a rush of black fluid that scalded Mana's arm. He cried out, dropping the candle. A thunderclap boomed overhead. Tan, regaining the dagger, circled behind the demon. "Look into its face," he yelled at Chow. "You must reject it. Deny its claim on your bloodline. Cast it out." Chow willed himself to stand, though shaky. He locked eyes, if the empty sockets could be called eyes, on the demon and screamed, "No more. The curse ends here. You took them all, but I will never submit. My family will never submit." His roar of anguish cut through the raging storm. For a moment, the demon faltered, its shape flickering. Then Tan leapt forward, plunging the dagger into the demon's chest. The demon let loose a deafening screech, thrashing wildly. Black ooze spattered the floor, sizzling against the salted boards. Man shielded his mother's face from the flying droplets. The demon's body convulsed, limbs flailing in irregular jerks. Tan twisted the dagger, reciting a final banishing incantation. "By the binding of iron, by the purity of this blood, return to the darkness from whence you came. Unyoke the living from your deathly grasp, and begone, foul spirit, begone." With a final shriek, the demon's outline collapsed inward, as though sucked into a void. A howling wind tore through the house, extinguishing the torch. When the thunder crashed again, the demon's presence was gone. Only the ragged hole in the roof remained, and the stench of burnt corruption. In the sudden hush, rain pounded the earth outside. Lin trembled in Chow's arms, and Man slumped against the wall, adrenaline fading. Tan sank to his knees, breathing hard, the dagger still in hand. They had survived. But the cost was incalculable: 4 family members lost, the entire household battered by terror. At last, the demon was no more. Or so they prayed. The morning arrived gray and bleak, the storm's remnants leaving mud and broken fronds scattered across the yard. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them. Tan used what remained of his supplies to cleanse the rooftop and patch the hole temporarily. Mother Lin, still fragile, insisted on lighting fresh incense at the ancestral altar. The urn was cracked, but she carefully placed a new one, praying for peace for the lost souls. She felt no malevolent presence now, just an emptiness where the demon had once lurked. Father Chow's arms were covered in bruises from his possessed struggle. Mana's arm bore burns from the demon's acidic spittle. Tan treated them with herbal salves, saying they would scar but not fester if cared for properly. Over a simple meal of rice and salted fish, they tried to process what had happened. "I've faced evil spirits before," Tan said quietly, "but rarely have I seen one so deeply rooted in a family line. Your grandfather must have forged a powerful pact. Do you know why?" Chow's gaze dropped to the floor. "I found a letter once in an old chest," he confessed. It hinted that grandfather gambled away the family's fortune. In desperation, he sought help from a dark practitioner, promising a blood sacrifice if he could restore prosperity. He never repaid it fully, so the debt fell to our generation. Man shivered, recalling how each death felt like a toll demanded by something ancient and hungry. "But it's over now, right?" he asked. "The demon is gone." Tan's expression was cautious. "We wounded it deeply and severed its link to your rooftop nest. I believe it's banished. Yet caution remains wise. Sometimes malignant spirits can linger in shards of memory or resentful corners of the house." Father Chow nodded. "We'll remain vigilant." But I sense a great weight lifted. They spent the day cleaning, burying the remnants of burnt talismans and washing away the black fluid. Villagers, hearing that a shaman had visited, grew curious. A few dared to approach, tentatively offering condolences and small gifts of fruit. Some still looked frightened, but relief was palpable that the cycle of death might finally end. At dusk, Tan prepared to depart. Man felt a pang of gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you for saving us," he told Tan, bowing respectfully. Tan gave a weary smile. "Your family's courage was the key. I only guided you. Remember, never underestimate the darkness that can grow from desperate choices." With that, Tan slung his satchel over his shoulder and walked the dirt path away from a haunted house, disappearing into the twilight. The night that followed was the first peaceful one in months. No scratching at the roof, no choking nightmares. Still, the echoes of terror lingered in the house's silent corners. Days turned into weeks. No new deaths plagued Tan Lok. The sense of dread receded. Father Chow summoned the courage to bring Tu and Na back home. The girls returned, teary with relief that their mother and brother were alive. The house rang with their nervous laughter once more. Chow poured his remaining savings into fixing the roof. Each night, they lit fresh incense at the new altar, praying for the ancestors' forgiveness and for the family's protection. Man sometimes lingered, staring at the rising smoke, remembering how death had crept through the floors and walls. The scars on his arm still stung when he thought of the demon's eyes. As for the rest of the village, many remained wary, yet a subdued respect grew around Mana's family. Whispers of "they survived the black spirit" circulated. Some approached Chow for superstitious advice, though he humbly admitted he was no spiritual expert. A month later, the family decided to hold a memorial for the four who died: Grandfather Din, Cousin Hone, Aunt Twen, and Uncle Duong. Village elders, seeing the sincerity of the gesture, supported the ceremony. They hoped it would bring closure to both the living and the departed. On a cool morning, they gathered around a makeshift altar near the ancestral graves. Man lit lanterns as Father Chow recited the names of each lost relative. Lin scattered fragrant petals. Tu and Na placed offerings of fruit, sweet cakes, and rice wine. A soft breeze whispered through the bamboo grove. Halfway through the ceremony, Man sensed a presence, like a hush pressing around them, but it carried no malice. Instead, it felt like quiet acceptance. He shut his eyes and silently prayed, "May you rest in peace, free from the curse Grandpa awakened." When he opened them, he glimpsed, just for an instant, the outline of a tall, gaunt silhouette beyond the tree line. His heart skipped. But this time, the figure seemed insubstantial, fading with the wind as though it had lost all power. A final echo of the torment that once gripped them. It did not reappear. The memorial ended calmly. A fleeting ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the graves. Man felt tears roll down his cheeks. Perhaps at last, the dead could find rest. Seasons passed. Father Chow, Mother Lin, Man Tu, and Na worked their land without further visitations. They replaced rotted bamboo sections, patched holes, and painted protective symbols near doorways. Although poor, they found a fragile peace. Sometimes at night, Man still jolted awake, expecting to see the demon's contorted face. But the house remained quiet, holding only memories and the possibility of renewal. Man grew into a tall young man of 19. He never forgot the tragedies that had shaped his adolescence. The scars on his arm reminded him daily that unimaginable evil lurked where desperation met dark magic. Yet he chose to devote himself to caring for his family, determined to prevent history from repeating. At times, traveling merchants or visitors asked about the rumors of Trung Tang Lin Tong, how multiple coffins left that house in quick succession. Man would speak softly, "We overcame it, with help and with faith." He didn't elaborate on the demon or the exorcism, wary of stirring old nightmares. One misty dawn, as he walked along the edge of the rice paddy, he paused to watch the sun's first light reveal the watery fields. Life had gone on. The birds sang, water buffalo plodded, children laughed in the distance. Even in the aftermath of horror, the world found ways to be beautiful. He knelt and pressed a hand to the earth, recalling Tan's final words. Never underestimate the darkness that can grow from desperate choices. Man understood that if one was not vigilant, curses could fester across generations. But with unity and courage, even a lethal demon could be driven away. He rose, inhaling the morning air. The cycle of birth and death, sorrow and resilience, continued in Tanlock. The shadows of the ancestral curse had lifted, leaving behind scars, yet also forging an unbreakable bond within his family. And so they lived, each day a triumph against the lurking darkness, each night an assurance that while old sins may cast long shadows, love and determination can light even the darkest corners.